Where does 2016 find me? I like labels, so I have a fixed one to myself, artisan. I make things and I fix things. I always have. I started woodworking when I was 8. So for 80 years I've been making stuff. For a little over half of those years I worked at fixing people through my medical practice. I've always held the wish that I could have known W.T. Nelson, my father's father. He died before I was born. I have vivid memories of the other grandfather, Scott Graves, as well as both grandmothers. My great-grandchildren may not have much experience with me in the years remaining. I want to leave them an expression of the kind of person I was. I wish W.T. Nelson had made a video showing him guiding his horses, cutting cloth, tending his furs, guiding his employees, making things out of wood. My grandchildren do not have an image of my father at his microscope or my mother's tending her flock of children. Though my DNA will be diluted to 1/8, the habits, interests, mores, stories, pictures, and myths will have their impact on each succeeding generation. You get what I'm driving at, something about family heritage. These pieces all have a commonality. In my opinion, they're all Windsor-inspired. The first example is similar to the ones originating in the Windsor Woods in 1724. Characteristically, they have a scooped pine seat, curved back with spindles, and splayed legs. Many variations exist. Though some of the workmanship seems crude, the design and execution have withstood the test of time. I doubt any of these are English. The exception might be the little stool. The story of their origins includes the Bodgers, who used a primitive but effective pole lathe to turn spindles and legs. It is the essential gracefulness of the design and the sturdy execution that has continuously inspired me to dare to shape and join wood. I love the grace, especially of the slender model. The tripod joinery is wonderfully done, a jointer's tour de force. The finished mahogany is lovely. I've certainly never learned to make a joint like those, and I certainly continue to try to make a finish like this. An outstanding example of a fine old brown Georgian dresser made from oak, meaning a sideboard where food was finished or dressed before being served at the table. Held with no metal fasteners, it has very complex hidden dovetail joints, joints I've certainly never learned to make myself. There's a special glow from the patina gained only by centuries of service as this wonderful brown oak has been rubbed and rubbed. This too is Georgian, meaning around 1800, and in this instance, characteristically made of mahogany. It has veneer and inlay. You have to admire the creator's sense of balance. It is so graceful. The detail work is so pleasing, and the hand-blown glass helps date it as truly antique. I made a copy for my daughter Karen. To do so required the acquisition of a number of skills. This is the third Georgian piece. It also boasts the more naturalistic finish for its gorgeous mahogany boards. This too typically has hidden joints. Many are dovetailed, no metal. I've seen similar joints demonstrated. They require skill and experience far beyond my pedestrian workings. All of these pieces, these 3 Georgian pieces, were obtained from a single dealer here in New England who, in several years after we bought them, wished to buy them back, to send them back to England because they were becoming more valuable in England. This nicely proportioned little cherry desk came from my father's Newburyport, Mass. home. I call it Aunt Gladys because she lived with it all her life and sadly permitted her far too numerous cats to leave their stains and odor. It took massive refinishing efforts to make it acceptable for polite company. We have 2 of these nice old containers. They were used for shipping and storage. Never as ubiquitous as barrels, still they were likely found in many homes and shops. Both of our examples have been cleverly modified to be magazine containers. This is an old Newburyport piece, and I have no knowledge of its age. It's hundreds of years old and showing it. You have to admire it. It's still standing, still performing its function uncomplainingly because its basic structure is sound. I doubt I can create for such longevity. This one and one in New Hampshire are both clearly utilitarian pieces wearing their histories on their surfaces. Both have suffered broken hinges, lost leaves, deep scars on their finish. But because they are fundamentally sound, their fruitwood surfaces are still performing their function, still sturdy. The very uneven saw marks on the edge suggest very old pit sawn wood, but who knows? Well, welcome to my shop in Cambridge. This is one of the 2 shops that I use. It's my playpen. My wife lets me come down here and play from time to time when I become insufferable. The other shop's in New Hampshire. It has heavier equipment in it. It's much larger, easier to move around in. This is compact, full of equipment, really only good for 1 person at a time. 2 people working in here could be dangerous because there's there are a lot of power tools. So this is I've had this shop since we moved in this house in 1997. Douglas, my son, helped create. We cut this room, put these walls up inside the basement to create this airtight shop, so that when I close that door, there's an exhaust fan up here so that I can keep negative pressure in here, so whatever dust I make or fumes go out rather than into the house, because the house circulates all of the air from the basement, and that would be not good because I make sawdust, and dust in a house is not welcome. So anyway, indeed, this is where I worship wood, and I am a wood worshiper. I'm going to take you through a whirlwind trip in which I turn a log into a box. Here I am slicing off, making a board. This was a very carefully executed slice. I did not want to demonstrate an amputation. Now a slice of the log goes to the table saw for truing the edges. Here I'm using pusher sticks to protect my fingers. Now the other edge becomes true. This demonstration piece is not usable. You've probably spotted there's a curve in it. So I'll carry on with a piece of cherry that I've already prepared in the very same way. I've been making boxes a very long time, 70 years or so. I'm beginning to get the hang of it. Now let's go to the other playpen. This is in our vacation home in New Hampshire called Anjing, meaning peaceful place. The workshop is not always peaceful. My work here is on a relatively more massive scale. The trees are right outside. Butt joints like these are the quickest, the simplest. You can glue them, nail them, or screw them. The second commonest way to join is with mitering. Now I'll show you how I make miters. Careful of fingers here. Caution, care, and experience all come into play. This operation would be forbidden in a shop class because I have to bring my hands fairly close to the blade. But that would be cutting the miter. The miter must be perfect for the joint to work. I'm demonstrating a little magic trick. This is painter's tape, and it works quite well, facilitating the process. This works well most of the time. I have certainly had humiliating failures, not shown here. The assembly is always both fun and a moment of anxiety. Now we have a box. Here's another. Ready for glue. I'll remove the tape from this one that I glued earlier today. Now it's ready for the bottom, which I prepared earlier. Voila! And then you top it off. There always has to be a final shaping of the top. Sometimes a machine is faster, in fact almost always faster than handwork. Here I'm using the big sander to finish the fit of the top. Now rounding for the aesthetics of the box. The cherry piece needs a top and a bottom. If it doesn't fit this way, try another. Again, again, voila! Will it work as hoped and planned? Eureka! You can see I'm surrounded by my babies, my products. These salt boxes I probably made in the 1960s. I went through a strong period of interest in colonial Williamsburg artifacts. I copied these from the catalog. At the time I had a table saw and a few antique wooden planes, so their manufacture was closer to the old reality than most of my stuff, where I've used a larger variety of power and hand tools. I struggled to copy or mimic the antique finish. The complex curves really create interest. Made as a gift, it never left home because I fell in love with it. One of the very few boxes where I used hand-cut dovetails. I was obviously already into my model boat building phase, which actually lasted almost 20 years, with overlapping other interests. This pen box demonstrates my need to get away from square shapes. I manufactured it from my special quilted mahogany. This one was inspired by an MFA exhibit of Eskimo Tlingit boxes and carvings. It thrilled me, and so I had to copy it. I had to copy a box. The original Eskimo model was larger and lighter so that it could be fixed to a sled to carry their goods. This little model demonstrates classic Eskimo bear motifs. This was a gift from Marianne. I bought the little silver hammer at a tool show and felt it needed a proper housing. Over the years, she's been at my mercy in terms of variously shaped wooden objects, usually at birthday time. The round body sat on my workbench for over a year. I simply did not know what to do with it. Finally, around February, the plan struck me and it became a Valentine container for my beloved partner. Valentine enclosed. In parallel to box making, I've always been a furniture designer and manufacturer. And tied in with that, I've also produced many frames and boat models. This dates to 1957. While serving as a doctor in the U.S. Navy, I actually had leisure, so could attend shop class in a local junior college. This walnut piece is way overbuilt, but here it is with all its scars 59 years later. It likely will make it to antique status. I had to make these because the Cambridge woodworker I asked said he didn't do walnut. So I copied his design from tiny little pictures in his catalog. They served as seats for my patients for 35 years. They're still quite functional here in our living room. They were made during my walnut phase. Earlier, it was mahogany, and more recently, cherry. We moved here from a big house and had to downsize. It was still important to us to display heirlooms and travel memorabilia, hence the need for this piece, which I made soon after we moved here. It also serves as a stereo cabinet with storage, so it's multifunctional. I made it in 2 parts in our basement, so the final assembly happened up here. This little model of a Muscongas Bay sloop was a gift from Marianne. I went through a period of intense interest in ship design and history. Modern versions of this sloop exist today, proving the wisdom of the shipwrights plying their trade 200 years ago. This melding theme of antique and modern will come up again and again. Here's the ship that stole the Queen's Cup from the Brits in 1851, renaming it the America's Cup. I manufactured almost everything needed, following plans for a model half this size. A 10-year project, I would get bored or stymied. It was finally finished in 1980. I had to learn how to use a sewing machine to complete the sails. This model is entirely my own creation, meaning I designed and manufactured it. This was one of my humbling projects. It gave me even more respect for the ship designers of yore. Once I finished this model, turned out in a basement of a summer rental during a hurricane, I floated it and guess what? It fell over. 9 pounds of keel weight later, it stayed upright, but would only sail straight, never turning. Humbling. This is a copy of a real sailing vessel. It graced a bookcase in my home office for 35 years. Many children explored its small cabin. I'm totally smitten by the 20th century artist Joseph Cornell, who for a number of decades produced magical, mysterious shadow boxes. It was immediately following my attendance at a marvelous exhibition of his work that I realized I can do the same. And so I have, though in no way do I have his magic. Not wishing to copy Cornell, I have forged my own approach. My imagination set free. So this is the very first one I made. It occurred to me as I walked out of the exhibit. My unsuccessful effort at buying a wrench at auction. This has the least obvious story, so in that sense, it's my most mysterious, therefore closest, but still miles away, from Cornell. It's a deviation from my pattern. One of my paeans to modern life, using recycled disc player parts. The birds are necessarily labeled as zeros and ones, just like machine language. I call this one To the Cloud, and I get the two confused. The titles are really interchangeable. Here again, the O's and the ones stream back and forth to the elusive cloud. Tiny silicon chips have replaced a lot of this electronic wizardry. This is one of a series of 6. The other 5 have gone to my wife and children. They all celebrate a place in New Hampshire or at least in New England. For instance, my son Jeffrey in Maine has a lighthouse, a lobster, and a potato. This one is my personal statement, trying to capture historic and present-day New Hampshire. The outer scenes depict aspects of our life at this White Mountain retreat. On the left are Rumney Industries, past and present. On the right are playthings. I call the inner box a cathedral. Here is a century-old Rumney, and on the right, equally old camp scenes. I have to say I'm thrilled to be here. It's about time I got myself exposed to people and the air and the light, because these boxes, these Cornell type boxes, have been in my basement, more or less obscure and unappreciated, except by a very few people. Here, there's the opportunity for hundreds and hundreds of people to have a chance to enjoy to be mystified and enjoy my stuff. These boxes that are behind me here are the product of the last 7 or 8 years of work. And I've been a woodworker for over 70 years. So I was always busily involved with wood as an antidote to my having to sit in an office and listen to people 7 or 8 or 10 hours a day. So I loved the activity of being able to form and shape and do what I want to do rather than conform to professional standards and what have you of a profession. I want to talk about this piece specifically, but also to relate it to the whole show. These boxes all obviously came from my imagination. Some of them have very obvious themes or meaning. Some don't. This one can be viewed several ways. One as just a pretty piece, which I do believe it's pretty. If you're a woodworker, you have to admire the grain and the color of the wood, the design of the wood, and so on. But beyond that, this obviously has many pictures, which obviously must have meaning, and they do to me. This piece I made for myself. It is an expression of what I wanted to capture about the place that I love in New Hampshire. And so I chose and put in what I want. It's for me. If it happens to enlarge people's appreciation or understanding, that's fine, but it's not necessary, because I didn't make it for other people, really. I made it for me. Of course, now that I've said that and recorded that in a way, people can perhaps appreciate and try to study this a little bit more. There is meaning to this, and when people ask me, I tell them. Family members know this, but I'm just stressing the fact that aside from being more or less a beautiful object, this has many layers of meaning. So far I've had 2 absolutely lovely, very self-satisfying responses, one from an established art critic and one from the woman that does all of this setting up of the art here at the Society, who happens to be a fan of Cornell boxes. These 2 ladies really went at it, and so they think they captured almost everything I have in there, and they are very laudatory of what they found. To my astonishment, here in my 89th year, I'm still going, and I'm going to be doing woodworking. I have every intention of making more little boxes like this. Got them by the million. Another Cornell box, maybe. I've got this one underway. Some furniture, maybe. It's all to continue my relationship with the craftsmanship of antiques, just sheer woodworking craftsmanship, my ideas about creativity, using my imagination. So I'm still going. I'm going to go as long as I can. This brief video has given you a glimpse of my activity as an artisan, very much in keeping with my wish to pass on how I have operated, just as I wish my great-grandfathers and my grandfather had done for me, so that I could have known more about them. There is more footage. There's more video available, a fuller accounting of my activity for anybody brave enough to look at it.